Ladies and gentlemen, get ready for a pulse-pounding ride like no other. In our riveting story, Widow faces ruthless biker thugs revealing her deadly cowboy secret. A seemingly ordinary ranch widow named Lucy Brooks is pushed to the breaking point when a fierce biker gang storms into her peaceful hometown. But what they don't realize is that Lucy isn't just any widow. She harbors a hidden gunslinger past that will make you question every assumption about small-town folks. Will Lucy's long-buried skills be enough to outsmart this vicious gang and protect everything she cherishes? You'll have to listen to the entire story to find out. Before we dive deeper, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you never miss an epic tale like this one. Your support helps us bring you more thrilling stories packed with heart-stopping action and unforgettable characters. Buckle up and stay tuned because Lucy's showdown with the Black Coyotes is about to redefine courage. A pale dawn light washed over the endless plains as Lucy Brooks stepped onto the creaking porch of her modest ranch house. The distant lowing of cattle and the rustle of morning wind through the tall grass were the only sounds she heard. For as long as anyone in the dusty little town of Amber Gulch could remember, Lucy had been a picture of quiet resilience. She was no longer young. Her eyes carried the soft lines of many sunrises and heartbreaks, but she moved with the steady confidence of someone who had long ago made peace with her environment. The building behind her was a single-story ranch home paint-peeling from weathered boards, flanked by a modest barn and a silo that hadn't seen fresh paint in years. Sparse as it was, it had been her sanctuary, especially after her husband Frank had passed on. Lucy's neighbors remembered Frank Brooks as a dedicated rancher who had proudly minded their cattle. Rumors sometimes hinted he'd done more than ranch work in his youth, but folks around Amber Gulch had the good sense not to pry into other people's pasts. The same courtesy extended to Lucy. All they knew was that she had come from out west some 2 decades ago and simply stayed devoting herself to the everyday task of the farm. She had an air about her, an odd mixture of deep-set sorrow and unwavering determination. The local townspeople respected that unspoken fortress of private grief and stoic courage. Over the years, Lucy seldom discussed her origins, and fewer still dared to ask. Despite her unassuming nature, Lucy's presence loomed unexpectedly large in Amber Gulch. Her kindly gestures helped many a neighbor in need, offering them a jar of homemade peach preserves or helping mend a broken fence. From local children to weary ranch hands, people discovered a sense of comfort in her voice. She was gentle but firm when necessary. One look from her gray-blue eyes could halt a child's tantrum or hush a rowdy bar conversation. Even if she was just an ordinary widow, there was something intangible beneath her calm facade, like a guitar string held taut quietly waiting to be played. In the months following Frank's death, Lucy found herself alone with the day-to-day chores of the ranch. Early morning cattle feeding, fence repairs, tractor maintenance. She knew her responsibilities by heart. Sometimes a wanderer passing through town would offer a hand, but mostly she worked alone, her sun-worn hat pulled low over her brow. This was how the townsfolk liked to see her, the steadfast widow courageously keeping her late husband's legacy alive. Still, a sense of change drifted on the wind. Over the radio crackling in her kitchen, Lucy heard occasional stories about a biker gang known as the Black Coyotes, whose name sent a chill through many once peaceful hamlets. Rumor had it they moved from town to town, stirring up trouble, land disputes, intimidation, theft. Their motives were often blurred, but people whispered the gang liked to harass small landowners with minimal law enforcement nearby. For a while, these rumors seemed distant, belonging to far-off counties. Yet Lucy had begun noticing faint tire tracks on the road leading past her ranch tracks that seemed deeper and more numerous than usual. Lucy paused, letting her gaze wander across the fence line toward the rolling plains. Something didn't feel right. Though she had long cultivated a tranquil life here, she found herself remembering half-forgotten lessons from another time. As the morning sun rose, a flicker of steel appeared in her eyes. She wondered if those distant rumors were about to find their way to Amber Gulch. An uneasy premonition settled upon her, and though she did not wish for conflict deep down, she sensed that trouble might be heading her way, perhaps sooner than she'd like. The first sign of the Black Coyotes' presence materialized at the local diner, a place called Greta's Pit Stop on the outskirts of Amber Gulch. Word spread fast when a group of heavily tattooed men wearing black leather jackets emblazoned with a coyote skull roared in on their motorcycles one late afternoon. By the time Lucy heard about it from an anxious neighbor, the gang had already eaten a meal, spewed a few lewd remarks toward the waitstaff, and left behind a glaring warning. They'd be coming back at the ranch. Lucy set aside her half-finished fence post project as she listened. Jackson Porter, an old friend and sometimes farmhand, was the one who brought the news. He was short and wiry with faded denim and a dirt-smudged cowboy hat. Usually cheerful today, he was tense. Leaning against the side of Lucy's barn, he described how the gang members had questioned Greta about who owned the biggest land parcels in town, especially those situated near major roads. According to Jackson, they'd shown a particular interest in Lucy's ranch, an interest that raised immediate concern. "That's unusual," Lucy said, wiping her brow with the back of her hand. "What would a biker gang want with farmland around these parts?" Jackson shrugged. "I heard they've been known to run contraband, sometimes turning old barns into stash sites. They might be looking to purchase land real cheap or bully folks off it. Word is, if owners refuse to sell well." He let his sentence trail off ominously. Lucy pressed her lips together. She remembered hearing stories of unscrupulous types who forced ranchers to give up their property, especially those who had no apparent means of protection. Her ranch was prime real estate in that sense, sprawling, isolated, and with minimal neighbors. It was the perfect location for someone wanting to stay under the radar. Nonetheless, Lucy tried to remain composed. Her first instinct was that these men had no idea whom they might be tangling with, but she hoped it wouldn't come to that. She had no desire to reopen old wounds or rely on skills she had long left behind. She appreciated the peace she'd carved out in Amber Gulch, and she intended to keep it. Over the next few days, Lucy kept her ear to the ground. She made a point of stopping by Greta's pit stop herself, ordering only a cup of coffee while discreetly gleaning whatever information she could. Greta, a tough older lady with decades of experience handling rowdy customers, recounted the gang's swagger and how they dropped hints about expanding territory. They hadn't explicitly threatened Greta, but the tone was clear enough. Greta looked uneasy, stirring coffee in her chipped ceramic mug as she talked. "They gave me the creeps. I've seen men like that before, bullies who think no one can stand up to them." Lucy nodded. She could sense everyone's fear. Small towns were often left to fend for themselves when violent criminals arrived. The local sheriff, an aging officer named Billy Haskins, was only one man with a part-time deputy. Their resources were meager and their response time slower than anyone liked. If the Black Coyotes decided to make Amber Gulch their new stomping ground, it would be a grim fight. On the ranch, Lucy quietly took inventory of the old tools locked away in the barn. She patted the wooden crates, some of which housed more than just tractor parts. Her late husband had known how to handle firearms, but Lucy was the one who truly understood them. Years ago, she had a life that required such understanding to stay alive. Since marrying Frank, she tried to leave that past behind. Now those memories felt achingly close. She wondered whether she would need them soon. Several days later, the Black Coyotes returned in force. It happened just after sunset when the warm amber sky slid into violet twilight. Lucy was locking up her chicken coop for the night when she heard the rumble of engines drifting up the dusty road. Moments later, half a dozen motorcycles appeared in the distance, kicking up plumes of dirt behind them. Before she could gather her thoughts, they were at her front gate. Leather jackets, silver chains, and arrogant smirks shone under the pale moonlight. Their leader, a tall man with a shaved head and a coyote skull tattoo covering his neck, rode at the front. He stepped off his bike, exuding a menacing swagger, and unlatched the gate without an invitation. Lucy squared her shoulders, her heart beating hard. "Evening, ma'am," the tall man drawled as he pushed the gate open. His grin was predatory. "We've heard a lot about this ranch. Good land, great location." Lucy forced her voice to remain steady. "I don't recall putting the ranch up for sale." He chuckled, revealing several gold teeth. "Things change, ma'am. We're making some investments around these parts. Doesn't matter if the owners want to sell or not. See, we plan to expand our business and we need a place that's quiet. No busybodies." A ripple of fear coursed through Lucy, but she maintained her composure. "I'm sure there's plenty of other land around. Mine isn't for sale." The man's grin turned cold. "Now that's not very neighborly of you, is it?" Lucy said nothing. She could see his companions leaning against their bikes, arms crossed. One of them, a hulking brute with knuckle tattoos, spat loudly on the ground. Another lit a cigarette, the orange glow flickering ominously. "Let's cut to the chase," the leader went on. "We'd like you out of here. We're offering you a chance to leave peacefully with a little cash in your pocket, if you're smart. But if you ain't so smart, things might go sideways." Lucy glared at him. "This ranch was my husband's livelihood. I'm not about to abandon it." He shrugged, then glanced over his shoulder to his gang. "Looks like we might have ourselves a stubborn one." That's all right, we'll be back soon. Maybe next time you'll see reason. Might be a fire, might be an accident, who knows? His smirk deepened. Accidents happen all the time out here. It'd be a shame if something happened to you or your property. With that, he and his gang roared away into the night, leaving Lucy standing alone by the fence. The stench of gasoline and cigarette smoke hung in the air like a bitter reminder of what had just transpired. Her hands trembled slightly, and she turned her gaze toward the distant horizon, her breath unsteady. She realized how real the threat had become. This wasn't just idle talk. The Black Coyotes had made their intentions known, and they were prepared to use violence to get what they wanted. Lucy's mind whirred with questions of how to protect her land and herself. The sheriff's department was too small to confront these well-armed thugs effectively, and any help from neighboring towns might arrive too late. She exhaled a deep, trembling sigh, escaping her lips. That night, Lucy didn't sleep well. She found herself walking her land under the starlit sky, recalling the life she had before Amber Gulch. She had promised herself never to return to that darkness, but as the threats grew, she knew that promise might have to be broken. Lucy spent the next morning in silent deliberation. She rose before dawn, as she always did, to feed the livestock. While the hens pecked at their grain and the cows ambled out to pasture, Lucy scanned the horizon. Every echo of an engine in the distance made her shoulders tense. She replayed the confrontation from the night before, the gang leader's gold-toothed grin hovering in her memory like a specter. After breakfast, she ventured into town to speak with Sheriff Billy Haskins. The sheriff's office was a cramped one-room building that doubled as Amber Gulch's makeshift courthouse. Billy, an aging man with a gray mustache and a slight stoop in his posture, listened intently as Lucy described the threat, his brow furrowed. These black coyotes. We've been hearing rumors. Billy admitted, sipping coffee from a chipped mug. They've caused problems in neighboring counties, forced a few families off their land. I've sent requests for additional state police support, but we're low on the priority list. Is there anything you can do? Lucy asked, trying to keep the desperation out of her tone. Billy sighed. I'm just one man with a deputy who's part-time. We can keep an eye out. Drive by your ranch more often. But if they come in force, we'll be outnumbered. He paused, setting his mug down. Listen, Lucy, you might want to think about leaving for a while, just until the dust settles. Leaving wasn't an option. Lucy shook her head firmly. This ranch is all I have left. It's my home. Billy nodded slowly, eyes heavy with sympathy. Then be careful, and if you have any way of protecting yourself legally, of course I won't discourage you from doing so. Lucy thanked him and left, uneasy. She appreciated Billy's candor, but knew that the law wouldn't be able to shield her when the bikers returned. After a quick stop at the general store for supplies, she headed back to her ranch. On the drive, her mind drifted to memories she'd tried to bury, the small desert town where she'd grown up. The rickety saloons where men boasted about their guns and their grit, and the horse corrals where she'd learned to ride and shoot with the best of them. Everyone called her Lucky Lucy back then, and the moniker wasn't just about chance. It was about her unerring aim and the fearless way she handled a revolver. She'd left that life, or so she'd thought. But in the barn, tucked away in a padlocked trunk, lay the tools of her old trade. She walked in, closed the door behind her, and moved to a corner where dusty cobweb crates sat stacked. Her heartbeat thundered as she pried open the trunk. Inside, carefully wrapped in oilcloth, lay her father's old Colt. Revolvers. Beautiful, timeless pieces of lethal craftsmanship. There was also a lever-action rifle, cleaned and maintained with the same care, plus an assortment of ammo she'd stashed away over the years. She had no illusions that a lone woman with a few guns could stand against a heavily armed biker gang indefinitely, but she also knew that underestimating her would be a grave mistake. Taking a deep breath, Lucy inspected each weapon. She checked the cylinders on the revolvers, practiced a quick spin and reload movements that once felt so natural. Her hands shook from the flood of memories. Still, the muscle memory was there, a testament to hours upon hours of practice. She pictured the faces of bullies she'd stared down in her youth, bar fights and showdowns that had tested her nerve. Even then, she hadn't liked violence. But sometimes, violence found you whether you wanted it or not. Lucy resolved to fortify her property. She might not have been a soldier, but she had a cowboy's cunning. She'd set up alarms, rig the barn doors, watch the roads leading in and out. And if the black coyotes forced her hand, they would discover just how misguided it was to target a supposedly harmless widow. 2 nights later, trouble arrived in the form of roaring engines just after midnight. Lucy had dozed off in her living room chair, a loaded revolver at her side, when she felt a slight tremor shake the floorboards. The windows rattled as a line of motorcycles pulled up outside. She snatched her revolver and peered through a gap in the curtains. Shapes moved across her yard, dark silhouettes against the moonlit fields. A lantern flickered into life at the edge of her property. She had set it out hours before, a simple decoy to draw attention away from the barn. Sure enough, the gang members paused near the flickering light, searching for signs of activity. Lucy's heart thumped so loudly she feared they could hear it. She counted at least 8 men. They were armed. She saw the glint of metal on their belts. She crouched low, recalling the plan she'd hastily devised. She had left a scattering of wooden crates and old barrels in strategic positions. If the bikers moved where she expected, she could slow their approach by forcing them to navigate the debris. More than that, she hoped to create choke points, small areas where they'd have to come through one at a time. She knew the property better than anyone, and that gave her an advantage. Yet her hand still trembled around the cold steel of her revolver. Would it be enough? Suddenly, a loud crash split the silence. One of the bikers had kicked over a barrel, cursing under his breath. "Where the hell is she?" he growled, scanning the darkness. A second man held a flashlight, sweeping its beam across the yard. When the light neared the porch, Lucy froze her breath, locked in her lungs. The beam lingered, then drifted away. "We know you're here, lady," another voice bellowed. "You got one last chance to come out and hand over the deed, or we'll burn this place to the ground." There was no chance Lucy would surrender. She clutched her revolver, crawling on her belly toward a window she'd propped open earlier. Her heart pounded, but her mind was steady, as if an older, sharper version of herself had awakened. She edged the barrel outside and aimed at a cluster of moving silhouettes. From her vantage point, she could see 3 bikers close together, scanning the yard. She fired a single shot into the air, more warning than harm. But it did the trick. They dove for cover. "Swearing she's got a gun," someone shouted. Gunfire erupted in response, bullets peppering the side of the house in a wild barrage. Lucy ducked, splinters of wood raining over her. She realized they had heavier firepower than she expected. One of them must be wielding a shotgun, judging by the widespread of the pellets. She needed to move. Huddling in place would make her a sitting duck. She clutched her revolver in one hand and a spare speed loader in the other, then crawled toward the back door. Bullets continued to slam into the walls. She heard glass shatter in the kitchen. Panic clawed at her chest, but she fought it down. She remembered the words of her father, teaching her to keep calm under fire. The key was discipline. Keep moving. Stay hidden. Wait for the right moment. Reaching the back door, Lucy slipped outside into the dark. The crisp night air hit her like a shock. She wove around the side of the house, using the shadows to stay invisible. From the yard, one of the bikers barked orders. "You 3 circle around the barn. The rest of you make sure she doesn't try to slip out, and watch out, she's armed and apparently not scared to shoot." Lucy grimaced. She would have preferred a quiet life, but if they wanted a fight, she'd give them one. Her cowboy instincts, honed through a youth of quick draws and quicker decisions, took over. She remembered how her father had taught her to identify each target before shooting, to avoid wasted bullets, and to keep track of cover. Her adrenaline surged and she felt eerily alive, the fear transmuting into focused resolve. Lucy decided she had one advantage beyond her firearms. She knew every inch of the land. The black coyotes didn't. Slipping through the darkness toward the barn, she kept low, mindful of the silhouettes that roamed with flashlights and guns. The gang members had split into groups. 3 men were stomping toward the barn to her right, while the others lurked near the house, creeping behind an old tractor. Lucy surveyed the trio heading barnward. They moved in a loose formation, scanning the gloom warily. The barn door was shut locked from inside, but she knew that wouldn't hold them for long. If they started rummaging around, they'd find her father's old stash of ammunition, as well as the horses she boarded for a neighbor. Lucy couldn't let them harm the animals or get their hands on more ammo. She tested the wind direction, feeling a gentle breeze from the southeast. The night was still, the sky moonlit, though she hated the idea of shooting anyone. She also understood that these men were threatening to destroy her home. They had come armed, and they weren't here to negotiate. Her father once told her, "Sometimes you can't avoid a fight, but you can choose how it ends." She swallowed hard and gripped her revolver, reminding herself to aim true. When the 3 bikers reached the barn, one kicked at the door. "Locked," he grunted. "Guess we'll find another way in." Another stepped around to the side, shining a flashlight. Lucy took a deep breath, pressing her back against the side of the tractor's large rear tire. She needed to act before they got inside. She counted to 3 in her head, then stepped forward into the open, aiming at the ground near the men. She fired a warning shot that ricocheted off the hard-packed dirt, sparks flying. "Step away from my barn," she shouted in a firm, carrying voice. Now the bikers spun around, returning fire. Adrenaline surged, and Lucy dove behind the tractor's rusted body. Bullets pinged off metal, the echo piercing the night. She exhaled, forced herself to remain calm, then peered around the side to return fire. Her revolver bucked in her hand. She was aiming low, trying to disable, not kill. Her shot caught one biker in the leg, and he howled, collapsing to the ground as his companions dragged him behind a water trough for cover. Hank's hit. One of them yelled, "Shoot that!" His voice was lost in another fusillade of gunfire. Lucy ducked again, heart pounding. She was outnumbered, but the bikers were uncoordinated. Their shots whizzed wildly through the air. If she could keep them scattered and panicked, she might hold them off. Any second now, the rest of the gang would realize what was happening and come charging over, though. She needed to act fast. Edging around the tractor, she spotted the glimmer of a window on the barn side. If she timed it right, she could slip through that window and secure the barn from inside, keeping them from using it as cover or finding extra supplies. Another flurry of bullets rattled the tractor. Lucy reloaded quickly, her well-practiced motions nearly automatic. She locked eyes on the men by the water trough. They were tending to Hank's bleeding leg and glancing frantically around. She had a brief window of time. Lucy sprinted out from behind the tractor, crouching low, boots kicking up dust, as she made a beeline for the barn. She heard someone shout an alarm, then more shots cracked through the night. A bullet whistled past her, too close for comfort. She ignored the burn of fear in her veins and vaulted into the barn through the open window, landing hard on a stack of hay bales. Her breath rushed out in a pained gasp, but she scrambled to her feet and hastily slid a wooden plank across the window to block it. Inside the barn, the air was thick with the scent of straw and livestock. Lucy heard the nervous whinnies of horses in their stalls. She whispered soothing words as she passed them, her boots thudding on the wooden floor. Feeling along the wall in the dark, her fingertips brushed the latch she'd installed just days before a makeshift reinforcement to keep unwanted visitors out. She bolted the door and slid another plank across it, heart pounding. Outside, the bikers' angry shouts mixed with the idling rumble of distant motorcycles. She knew the rest of the gang would soon converge on her position. The three at the barn were pinned down, but eventually they'd regroup and come at her. She had to prepare quickly. At the far end of the barn stood a row of old stalls, one of which hid a small metal locker. Inside were extra cartridges for her father's lever-action rifle. She loaded them in hurriedly, her hands shaking as she clutched the weapon. Once that rifle had been her constant companion in a life she'd left behind. Its worn wooden stock felt familiar, now comforting, even in the midst of chaos. She double-checked the action, then took a position near a partly boarded-up window facing the house. She could see silhouettes moving across the yard. More bikes had pulled up. Their headlights illuminated the darkness, revealing half a dozen more riders arriving to reinforce their wounded comrades. Lucy glimpsed the tall gang leader with the shaved head and coyote neck, tattoo barking orders, gesturing toward the barn. They gathered in a huddle, likely planning an organized assault. Lucy's pulse hammered. She realized she needed a diversion, something to throw them off long enough for her to gain another advantage. Minutes later, she heard an engine rev loudly. Headlights swung across the barn door, bright beams cutting through the gaps in the wooden slats. She braced herself, peering down the rifle's sights, and waited. She felt the barn door quake under a powerful impact. Maybe they were using a makeshift battering ram or the front of a motorcycle to smash it in. The door held for the moment, but the wood groaned ominously. Lucy exhaled slowly, aiming at the lower edge of the door. She fired through the wood, hearing a startled yelp. She didn't know if she'd hit anyone, but the assault paused momentarily. The gang's frustration was audible in their shouting. The battered barn door shuddered again, and she heard nails popping from the strain. A wave of heat stirred the air. Lucy smelled something acrid: gasoline. The bikers must have realized it would be simpler to burn her out than to confront her bullet by bullet. A sense of dread knotted in her stomach as she spotted the tall leader tossing a lit rag onto a trail of spilled gas. Flames ignited and began creeping closer to the barn. Smoke curled through the night air, tinted orange by the growing blaze. "Stop, you idiots!" she heard one biker shout. Hank's still out here with a bullet in his leg, but the ringleader didn't seem to care. He was fixated on victory, whatever the cost. Lucy realized she was running out of options. If the barn caught fire, the horses would be in mortal danger, and her best defensive position would become a death trap. She couldn't simply barricade herself inside. With no time to lose, Lucy grabbed the rifle, hurried to the stable stalls, and began unlocking the gates. The horses whinnied, frightened by the noise and the scent of smoke. She needed them free in case flames spread. She opened the main barn door just enough to let them out. Naturally, they shied from the raging confusion outside, but Lucy slapped their flanks, sending them galloping into the night in a thunder of hooves. Better they roam free than be trapped inside a burning barn. Now Lucy faced a split-second decision: stay and risk being surrounded by fire, or try to escape into the fields. She grimaced at the swirling smoke. It was time to retreat, regroup, and maybe lure these men into an area of the ranch she could control more effectively. With a final glance at the barn, she hefted the rifle over her shoulder and ran toward the back exit, praying she could find cover before the bikers spotted her. Lucy emerged onto open ground, staying low to avoid the glow of the spreading flames. The acrid smell of burning hay filled the air, and an orange hue danced ominously over the ranch. She felt a pang of loss. It wasn't just a barn going up in smoke, but memories and artifacts of her and Frank's life together. And she forced herself to focus on survival. If she hesitated, the black coyotes would show no mercy. Crouching behind an overturned water trough, she scanned the chaos. The gang members were caught off guard by the fleeing horses. A couple of bikers tried to corral them, or at least avoid being trampled in the confusion. Others stood between Lucy's house and the barn, weapons at the ready, scanning the darkness in search of her. The tall leader prowled among them, shouting orders. His fury was evident. She'd eluded their trap, wounded some of his men, and still remained at large. Lucy took the opportunity to circle around the perimeter. She knew that the southern fence line led to a shallow ravine. Although it was rocky and uneven, it provided enough cover to approach her own home from behind. Gripping the rifle, she moved as quietly as possible across the dusty terrain. She paused once she reached the lip of the ravine, peering down. Moonlight revealed a narrow path amid jagged rocks, a place Lucy had explored in her youth when she sought solitude from town, drama, and personal demons alike. Now it could serve as a stealthy route around her ranch. She slid down carefully, her boots slipping on loose gravel, the rifle clutched tight. As she navigated the ravine, she could still hear the distant roar of motorcycles and the crackle of burning wood. Her barn was likely lost. Part of her seethed with anger at the gang's callous destruction, but she also felt a new sense of determination bloom. They had no idea about the life she once led, or the lengths she would go to protect what remained of her world. Each step stirred old instincts: how to move without being seen, how to listen for footfalls and measure her own breath. Finally, she reached the far side of the ravine, which opened onto a cluster of brush and low trees behind her house. She crouched among the scrub, letting her eyes adjust to the dimness. She could just make out two bikers stationed in her backyard, flashlights slicing through the night. One had a shotgun slung over his shoulder, the other brandished a pistol. She noticed they were tense, anxious. That was good. Nervous enemies made mistakes. Lucy considered her plan. She wanted to draw the bikers away from her house, possibly toward the corral on the western side of the property. There the terrain was uneven, dotted with old fence posts and ditches, perfect for an ambush if she could lure them. Drawing a deep breath, she chambered a round in the rifle, the sound of familiar click-clack that sent a chill of nostalgia through her. Then she aimed high, looking for a vantage point to place a distraction shot. She fired a single round at a signpost on the west side of the yard. The bullet pinged off the metal, reverberating across the silence. Immediately, the two bikers spun in that direction, shouting to each other. "She's over there," one yelled, and they took off at a run. Lucy ducked lower, staying hidden in the brush as they passed. They were so focused on the noise that neither noticed the faint shape of a woman crouched in the darkness to their left. With them gone, Lucy slipped closer to the house. Broken windows gaped where bullets had torn through, and the front porch bore new holes in the wooden steps. She stepped carefully over shards of glass and peered inside. The living room was dark furniture, overturned. Bullet holes peppered the walls. She swallowed a wave of sorrow. Her safe haven was no longer so safe. But she needed a vantage point, a place to make her stand if it came to that. Clutching the rifle, Lucy stepped into her home, each nerve on edge. If the gang realized they'd been duped, it wouldn't be long before they returned. She had to think swiftly how to outlast an entire group of armed bikers who had no qualms about killing. Her mind flickered with old memories of nights spent wide awake in a bunkhouse with a pistol under her pillow, half expecting trouble that never knocked. Tonight, trouble had kicked down the door, and only the ghost of her cowboy self could save her. Lucy decided to create a final line of defense inside her home, choosing the upstairs loft, an area accessible by a single narrow staircase. If the bikers rushed the house, the choke point would force them to come up one at a time. She could defend that tight spot better than an open yard. She moved quickly, dragging an old dresser in front of the staircase for partial cover and stacking wooden crates behind it to reinforce the barrier. Her thoughts were racing. She was one person against a sizable gang. She couldn't hold out forever, but maybe she could whittle them down, injure enough of them to break their resolve. Most bullies her father had taught relied on intimidation to win fights before they began. If confronted with real resistance, many lost their nerve. She clung to that hope even as her heart hammered. From the upstairs window, Lucy had a vantage of the ranch yard. The barn was still smoking, much of it reduced to embers, though the worst of the flames seemed to be dying down. She spotted a group of 4 bikers near the barn's remains consulting with the tall ringleader, who gestured angrily toward the house. Another 2 men, likely the ones she'd lured away, were returning from the west side empty-handed. Their frustration was evident in the way they stomped across the yard. Lucy overheard pieces of their conversation, carried on the wind. Crazy lady shots coming from different directions. "She's picking us off. She can't be alone." "Maybe she's got help," the ringleader snarled. "Don't be stupid. We outnumber her, 10 to 1. She's just a ranch widow who got lucky with a shot. Now let's end this." They began moving toward the house, flashlights bobbing in the darkness. Lucy felt a surge of dread mixed with grim determination. She steadied her rifle on the windowsill, waiting. As the men approached, she spotted at least 3 carrying shotguns, 2 with pistols, and another brandishing what looked like a semi-automatic rifle. The numerical advantage was theirs, but Lucy had the element of surprise from her vantage above. She exhaled slowly, lined up her sights, and squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked through the air, striking the man with the rifle in the shoulder. He spun and hit the ground, weapon clattering away. Instantly, chaos erupted. The others dove for cover, cursing and shooting wildly. Bullets pinged off the siding, punched through the window, and snapped around Lucy's ears. She dropped below the sill, crawled to a different angle, and peered out again. Now they were spread out using the porch, a fallen wagon, and any debris they could find as cover. Her vantage forced them to keep their heads down. She knew she couldn't stay in one spot too long, though. She grabbed the rifle, scurried back toward the staircase, and positioned herself behind the makeshift barricade. Even as the bikers loosed another volley of shots, she heard the front door splinter. They were coming in. She took a deep breath, recalling her father's voice in her head. "Don't panic when you're pinned. Breathe, focus, wait for them to move." Lucy steadied her weapon at the top of the stairs. The house fell silent for a moment, broken only by the creaks of floorboards and the labored breathing of men trying to muster courage to climb. Then came heavy footfalls. She glimpsed a bulky form in the dim light, stepping onto the first stair. The man carried a pistol, aiming it shakily upward. Lucy squeezed the trigger, hitting the railing beside him. He dove back, cursing, but that first shot served its purpose. The men realized this was no idle threat. Suddenly, another wave of bullets ripped through the ceiling from below, chunks of plaster raining down. Lucy ducked, shielding her face. They were firing blindly, hoping to flush her out. She crouched lower, heart thudding so hard it felt like it might explode. In a flash, she recalled the old bar fights where a well-placed shot to the overhead chandelier often ended a conflict by intimidation alone. Maybe she could replicate that effect. She aimed at the ceiling fan, which hung precariously over the main entryway. One shot snapped its chain, sending it crashing down. The thunderous noise startled the bikers, and Lucy heard them scramble away from the falling debris. Seizing that moment, she pivoted, fired 2 more rounds toward the stairs. She heard a startled yelp and a heavy thump, another man down, maybe wounded. This was how she had to fight. Strike, fast, keep moving. She felt a twisted sense of both guilt and necessity. She never wanted to kill, but these men wouldn't hesitate to end her life. She had no choice if she wanted to survive. The ringleader's voice echoed through the chaos. "You're just making this harder on yourself, lady. This is your last chance. Hand over the deed and walk away, or I'll burn your whole house down around you." Lucy pressed her back against the wall. Smoke from the barn still tinged the air, creeping through broken windows. Her home was riddled with bullet holes, shattered glass, and bits of fallen plaster. But she wasn't surrendering. Not when she'd fought so hard, not when Frank had built this place with his own hands. "Come and take it," she said under her breath, reloading her rifle and steeling herself for the final showdown. Time seemed to slow as Lucy listened for the slightest sound on the staircase. A wave of adrenaline surged through her veins, sharpening her senses. Her body felt numb except for the rapid pounding of her heart. She braced the rifle against her shoulder and waited. At last she heard cautious steps, 3 sets, maybe 4, coming up the stairs. They'd realized charging in was suicide, so they crept. Guns raised, hearts pounding. Lucy counted each footfall as if it were a thunderclap. She didn't want to kill anyone, but she had no choice. They were determined to harm or kill her, and she wouldn't surrender her home to their brutality. When the first man's head appeared above the dresser barricade, Lucy fired without hesitation. The bullet caught him in the arm, spinning him into the wall with a grunt. The second man lunged upward, blasting a shotgun in her direction. Pellets shredded the edge of her cover, peppering her with splinters. She winced, returning fire. The shot struck him in the chest, sending him tumbling backward into the third man. The hallway erupted in confusion. Shouts, screams, the desperate clatter of boots on stairs. Lucy knew that if she lost her nerve or missed a shot, it would be over. She moved to a different angle, blinking smoke and dust from her eyes. Her finger squeezed the trigger again, and another biker dropped to his knees, disarmed. The air was thick with the tang of gunpowder, the floor sticky with splatters of blood. For a single horrifying moment, Lucy realized just how lethal her old skills truly were. A sudden silence followed. No more movement on the stairs, just the groans of wounded men. Lucy's entire body trembled. She heard the ringleader below shouting curses. Then she recognized another sound, the distant wail of sirens. Perhaps neighbors or passers-by had called for help upon seeing the flames. The cavalry might finally be on its way, though it felt almost too late. Still, the ringleader wasn't giving up. She heard him rally the few remaining bikers outside. She glanced through the second-floor window and saw them gathering, their faces set in grim determination. One held a red canister of gasoline, likely intending to finish what they started by burning the house down. Lucy's pulse thundered. She couldn't let them trap her inside. She quickly hefted the rifle and fired at the canister, hoping to puncture it from a distance. Her first shot missed, whizzing past the biker's shoulder. He yelled, dropping low but not low enough. The second shot found its mark, and the canister leaked gas onto the ground. The biker scrambled away, cursing as fuel splashed on him. His comrade tore the canister from his grasp, trying to staunch the flow. Lucy chambered another round, but her window was blasted by return gunfire. She dove back, shards of glass cascading around her. Below, the ringleader roared, "Screw this. We'll torch the place and let her burn with it." Lucy realized they were stepping up their final assault sirens. Or not, they wanted to end this quickly. She needed to act, or her home would become a fiery grave. With the last of her courage, she scrambled downstairs, carefully stepping over the wounded bikers. One tried to raise a weapon, but she kicked it away, leaving him groaning in pain. As she reached the ground floor, she saw flickers of flame outside the shattered windows. Kicking open the back door, Lucy burst out into the cool night. A standoff was imminent. The ringleader stood there with a lit match, gasoline trickling across the porch. He sneered, gold teeth catching the light of the flames. "You want to keep fighting, lady? Let's see how you handle the heat." Lucy leveled her rifle at him, sweat trickling down her forehead. Her voice was hoarse. "Drop the match." He laughed, stepping forward. "You really think you're faster than fire?" She said nothing, steadying her aim. A part of her wanted to see the fear in his eyes that must have dawned in so many outlaws, who realized far too late the skill they'd provoked. The match dropped from his fingers, and Lucy fired. The bullet struck the porch at his feet, making him jerk back. The match fizzled on the ground inches from the gas. In that instant, the wail of sirens grew louder, blue and red lights flashing at the edge of her property. 3 police cruisers careened into the yard, and armed officers pouring out. The ringleader whirled, torn between the guns behind him and the approaching law. He looked up at Lucy with a murderous glare. His face contorted in disbelief that a lone widow had stymied his gang. The last thing Lucy remembered was the bright spotlight of a police cruiser sweeping over her, the sudden eruption of commands from officers, and the ringleader dropping to his knees as rifles were aimed at him. A wave of exhaustion washed over Lucy. Her knees trembled, and she sank to the ground. Smoke still curled into the sky from her demolished barn, and broken glass glittered on her porch. She thought of Frank, of the dreams they had for this ranch. She had saved it, but at a terrible cost, unveiling a part of herself she had tried so hard to bury. In the days that followed, the story spread like wildfire through Amber Gulch. The Black Coyotes were routed. Some arrested, others scattering across county lines, leaving their wounded behind. Sheriff Billy Haskins. Somewhat dazed by the carnage, offered Lucy an apology for not being able to protect her sooner. Townsfolk marveled at her unflinching defense, dubbing her a legend. In hushed tones, children whispered tall tales about that quiet widow who outdrew a biker gang, while older residents spoke of justice and how bullies sometimes pick the wrong target. Lucy walked her land, heart heavy with the destruction, but relieved the threat was gone. Though she wore her old denim jacket with a new tear in the sleeve, her posture was resolute. She helped the officers gather evidence, answered their questions politely, and accepted what small comfort her neighbors could give. Yet something had changed in her eyes, an acknowledgement of who she truly was and what she was capable of if pushed. When peace finally settled over Amber Gulch once more, Lucy Brooks returned to her quiet routines, mending fences, tending the fields, and rebuilding the barn with the help of grateful townsfolk. But the memory of that night lingered in every hammered nail, every sunrise that lit up the battered ranch house. She was no longer just the widow everyone assumed was too gentle to resist. Beneath her modest exterior lay a deadly cowboy's secret, one she had hoped never to reveal, but which had in the end saved her home and her life. And so Amber Gulch returned to its uneventful calm, yet those who had witnessed Lucy's stand would never look at her the same way again. She had shown them that sometimes the strongest defenders are the ones you least expect, and that the quietest among us often harbor the loudest echoes of history. In time, the ranch would heal the bullet holes, patch the barn rebuilt. But the legend of the widow who faced ruthless biker thugs and won would burn brightly in the town's collective memory, a testament to courage, resilience, and the enduring power of a well-guarded secret. From a quiet life defined by daily ranch chores to a jaw-dropping standoff that left an entire biker gang reeling, Lucy Brooks proved that true strength often hides behind a humble facade. In the wake of the battle, the flames subsided and the dust settled, revealing a remarkable victory for the courageous widow and her community. Although it came at a cost, her barn ravaged her home, scarred by bullets. Lucy's determination and spirit shone bright, reminding us that hope can thrive even in the darkest hour. Her story stands as a testament to grit, loyalty, and the enduring power of standing up against wrongdoing. We hope you've been as inspired as we have by this unforgettable tale. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know what you think about Lucy's fight for justice. And if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe so you won't miss out on more heart-pounding stories that celebrate courage and resilience.